of this congregation and welcome you all to the Long Island Peace Summit on Strategies to End the War in Iraq, which is sponsored by the Long Island Alliance for Peaceful Alternatives, Great Neck Sane Peace Action, and Shelter Rock Forum of this congregation. This Sunday here in our service, we're going to use as a responsive reading that very meaningful reading from Archibald MacLeish, his poem entitled The Young Dead Soldiers, which ends in this way. They say, the young dead soldiers say, our deaths are not ours, they are yours. They will mean what you make them. They say, whether our lives and our deaths were for peace and a new hope or for nothing, we cannot say. It is you who must say this. They say, we leave you our deaths, give them their meaning. We were young, they say. We have died. Remember us. Over the past 4 years, the organizations sponsoring this gathering this evening and many others on Long Island have been attempting to give meaning to the deaths of those who have died, not only in the current war, but in previous wars. And I'm appreciative, so many of us are, for the actions of so many of you. And this gathering this evening is a meaning-making event as well. And so I introduce to you now Margaret Melkonian, who's a board member of the Long Island Alliance, who will introduce the evening's program.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience about the line, and I do want to remind you to sign in after you have coffee and refreshments later on. I want to thank Reverend Paul Johnson for his introductions and Bert Napier for his support, and for the UU Congregation Shelter Rock for their hospitality and support. Before we go into our program, I wanted to give you kind of a sense of what's ahead this evening, and that's why we were kind of anxious to start as soon as we could. We will have a keynote speaker, Leslie Cagan, who we've asked to speak for 15 minutes. The panel discussion will last for approximately 40 minutes. Each speaker has about 4 minutes. We have Stan Romaine here with signs, so we're going to be very strict with the speaker's time. There'll be a summary and a call to action, which should take about 5 minutes, and that should bring us to 9 o'clock, more or less. And that will be followed then by, there'll be an audience dialogue after the panel discussion. I think I left that out. And each of you will have a minute to also address the same questions that we asked our keynote speaker, our panel, and ask you to address is, with the work that we've all been doing with many organizations on Long Island, what more can we do? What more should we be doing? What are we doing? And have you addressed that same question? We'll follow that, as I said, with a summary, and then a reception and some informal conversation. I want to just begin by acknowledging who all is in this room and the years of faithfulness and persistent work for so many, for so long, who have worked in pursuit of peace and justice, and their persistent resistance to war. Many on the panel, many of you in the room, 20 years, 30 years, 60 years, 70 years, and no one has given up. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight. The director, Megan O'Hanley, who will introduce our speaker. And I want to just acknowledge her steady and strong work on tonight's program and our collective efforts that for more than 4 years have tried to end the war in Iraq. So Megan.
The purpose of the program this evening is to explore the question, what more should we be doing both individually and collectively to end the war in Iraq? And the reason the the panel is so large is because we felt it was really important to have, board representation of all the many groups on the island who've been working to end the war for the past 4 years. And the work we're all doing on the local level is important and necessary work. But what is equally important is that we connect our work to the efforts of groups like us all across the country. And that connection is made through our affiliation with United for Peace and Justice. For those of you who are familiar with it, it's a coalition of more than 1,300 national, regional, and local peace and justice groups. And it's an invaluable resource for all of us local groups. Not only does it provide information about issues and a place to publicize our events through its website, but it also coordinates national days of action and some of the largest anti-war demonstrations in the history of the country. In our experience is that our members like knowing that while we're standing out on Old Country Road with our Bring the Troops Home Now signs, people in Kansas and California and Chicago are doing the same thing. And United for Peace also helps us to make the connection to the international peace movement. I'm sure all of you remember in February 2003, before the war started, there were massive protests all around the world. Millions of people in the streets of, in Italy and London and New York, 500,000 people. And United for Peace was the moving force behind those demonstrations. So we're really pleased that Leslie Cagan is able to join us tonight. She's the co-chair of United for Peace and Justice, and she's someone who has dedicated her life to working for progressive and just causes, from ending the war in Vietnam to ending nuclear proliferation, racism, and advocating for equal rights of people all over. So we're very pleased that she's with us tonight.
Someone should give me something signed before I go on, and I'm not. Oh, 1 minute left. Thank you. And in conclusion, well, as I was driving out here today, first of all, let me just thank the organizers of this meeting. It's a very important gathering here tonight, both for doing this kind of gathering and then also for welcoming me into your community. These kind of meetings are happening literally in every corner of the country. We are collectively faced with a tremendous challenge. What are we going to do? And the question really is, what will it take in order to end this war? If we can figure out what it will take to end it, that might give us a little bit of a roadmap as to what we should do in order to make that happen. So as I was coming out here tonight, I was thinking how fitting it is that this session is happening today. Today when Congress caved, basically, and gave the president, the guy in the White House, gave him basically what he wanted to continue this war, and actually not to continue this policy which has been an utter failure right from day one, but actually to escalate it in terms of more troops going in there and an even greater commitment to this ongoing war and this war that never should have happened. Today, as that vote is taken, it's timely and appropriate that we try and take stock of where we are as a movement, what we need to do, what have we been doing that we need to build on, are there new things that we need to do, are there new people that we need to be working with, all those kinds of questions. Let me just say, and I think maybe some of the other panelists will also in on this, is that the news from Washington is not all bad. It's pretty bad, but it's not all bad, in that something like 140 members of the Congress today voted no. And I believe, if my memory serves me right, that is the largest vote against this war that we have seen in some 4.5 years, almost 5 years, when really it was October of 2002 when Congress first gave the President the authorization he wanted to go to war. So something has happened. Something's happened that led those 140 members to say no. And what has happened is you all. It's the work of people, and also my understanding is that every member of the Long Island delegation voted no. So, so that goes to you. That's because of the work that you all have been doing. People do not go to Congress and just all of a sudden vote the right way. They do that because they've heard from the people who put them into office. That's you and all the other people you work with. So I hope in that you feel good about the work you've done, even though the overall outcome is not good. There is no end in sight. I don't know how else to say it, right? But let's be honest with each other. Right now, there is no end in sight to this war. And yet we know that this war has to come to an end. It cannot go on forever. So the real question is, when will it end? And how will it end? And what do we do to move that process along? How do we help it end? Well, let me just say, if I had the answers to that, then you would all have your assignments right now, and you'd all be out to bring it. Obviously, I don't think even we here collectively have the answer. We have some insights and some ideas and some things to work with, but we don't yet have the complete answer as to how we're going to make this war end. One element, though, of it is that we have to keep figuring out how do we help people who we know are against this war but have not yet done anything. How do we help them find the place that they feel most comfortable, the ways that they feel most comfortable in becoming an anti-war activist? For some people, all that will mean is once in a while calling their member of Congress. Well, we need to find those people and make sure they are calling their members and keep calling them and keep calling them. For others, all they will do is periodically, once in a while, write a letter to the editor of the local paper. We need to make sure they keep doing that. We need to welcome people and we need to invite people into this movement in whatever ways they feel most comfortable. Now, let me just say, I want to clear up something here. This is not only about numbers. Yes, it is about numbers, right? As large as our demonstrations have been, and as outspoken as we've been in our communities, we know there are many, many more people in our communities and in every corner of the country who are with us. So it is partially about numbers, just getting those people to be active, to take a stand, to be public in their opposition to the war. It's all well good people to sit home and yell at TV, but it doesn't do a lot of good. They need to be public in their opposition to the war. But it's not only about numbers. It's also about being strategic. It's about figuring out how those numbers can apply the most pressure at the most important places. And there are several issues that come to mind, or several ideas that come to mind when I think about that. Where are those places? It seems to me that as slow as it feels sometimes the action in Congress seems to move so slowly, Congress has to remain one of the points of pressure. They do, after all, have the power to end this war. And they will have to vote on another supplemental in just a few months, probably in September. The president will again go to them for billions more dollars. So they have that power. That's why it's important to keep the pressure on them. It's not some abstract notion that we think Congress is important because we elected them, this is a representative democracy and all that. That is important. But most important is that they have the power to actually end this war. So that's why it's critical that we keep putting pressure on them to leverage that power, to use the power they have. It seems to me, though, that we also, as a movement, need to strengthen our work with those people either being asked to join the Army, the military, people who are already in the military, who are speaking out against the war, people who have served in Iraq, who are coming back and saying, no, this war is a nightmare and insane, and the families of people in the military. That kind of nexus of people in and around the military, we need to figure out how to support them. We need to put a direct pressure on the ability of the United States government to use its military might. That means helping to slow down, if we can't completely stop, at least slow down the flow of young people into the military, and it means supporting those people who are very bravely beginning to speak out, and the more who are in uniform. And the more we support them, the more we'll see other people also speaking out. And that will put a tremendous pressure on the military as well. And I think that that's a very strategic area of our work that we have to figure out how to do and how to do better. The other thing I think we need to do is to go to the places, the institutions, the people that aren't automatically seen as anti-war activism or a location of anti-war activism and push them. For instance, imagine if there was a national campaign to get every governor of this country to say no more. We don't want our National Guards people serving in Iraq. We need them here at home. We don't want the tax dollars that the citizens of our state are sending into the federal government being used with this war. If all 50 governors were to speak out against the war, that would be a little unusual. We don't usually see things like that. If more of the city councils and local governments spoke out, and not just passed resolutions, but then actually went to Washington and put pressure on Congress and on the White House. If more professional organizations, a few months ago, the American Historical Association, a very prestigious academic association with a long history, for the first time spoke out against this war. If more professional organizations were speaking out, and again, not just passing a resolution internally, but then making that public, going to the media, reaching out to other professional organizations. In other words, and these are just a few examples that come to mind. If we could take our work into every arena of life and push the anti-war sentiment out into the public, that would in turn translate into even greater pressure on Washington. So I believe my time, I have a few more minutes left. What I want to say is, I want to say two more points. That's technology. 2 points that I want to raise here. One is today, not only did Congress vote, but Bush made another one of his incredible statements. And basically he said, if I got it right, because I couldn't hear all of his comments or the clips I heard, was that we have to keep this war going because otherwise the terrorists are coming. That's basically the line that he and his people have put out since 9/11 in 2001. This is the same drumbeat that we over and over and over again. And let me be perfectly clear. I and the United for Peace and Justice, and I'm sure everybody on this panel and everybody in this room, does not condone terrorism. We are opposed to terrorism. But how do you deal with the worldwide problem of terrorism? Do you deal with it by bombing innocent people, by sending them in the Marines? No. In fact, that becomes a breeding ground and a training ground for new people to join the ranks of terrorist organizations. We have got to tackle this framework of this so-called war on terror and show it for the sham that it is. Just as the war on drugs was a total sham, the war on poverty, so the other thing I just want to wrap it up and say, I got my 1 minute, so it's 9 days. I want to go back to what Reverend Johnson said about how do we give meaning to people who have died in this war. Well, and I assume he meant, and know he meant, not only the U.S. service people whose lives were thrown into this nightmare for no good reason, but also the hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who died. That is a hard question to answer. How do we give meaning to that, to a meaningless, outrageous situation? The first thing, of course, that we must do is end this war and bring all the troops home and leave no bases behind and no U.S. personnel behind. But the other thing we have to do, and again, I wish I had an easy formula for how to do this, we have to do our work of ending this war in a way that lays the foundation to help prevent any other war like this from ever happening again. That is in our lives. So again, I want to thank the organizers tonight, and I look forward to hearing all the comments.
Thank you so much, Jesse. We've asked the panel tonight to address the question of what more we can do, what we can do better, how do we step up our efforts, and what haven't we tried, what's most effective that we maybe we're already doing. And Leslie has begun us on that, in that conversation. Each panelist, as I said, has 4 minutes to make sure we have someone keeping time. So let me begin with our panel. And our first speaker is Sister Mary Beth Moore from House Christie, Long Island. And I'm giving short introductions. There's much more for all of the speakers that we can say. Sister Mary Beth Moore, House Christie, Long Island.
Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. That's Howard said. We who have been involved in the war, of protesting even before it began, are asking how can we do more, and as Leslie said, what will it take? Let me suggest a little spin on this question for this particular audience. We cannot slacken our efforts one single bit. But does ending the war take into account not only how much we do, the quantity, but also the quality of our work? After all, even if all of us present doubles the quantity of our efforts, would that be enough? And what we really want to do is multiply the millions of people, persuade the millions of people each to do a small act. So how do we deepen the quality of our efforts for peace? I'd like to suggest an acronym that was supplied by a friend, a peace activist who really lives with the advice she gives. I suggest we must deepen and share our hopes, H-O-P-E-S. H for hope. By hope, I refer to a deep conviction about the humanity and importance of what we are doing. The hope that human beings are meant to do better than this, and that our work is rooted in a much larger movement that foresees a peaceful world, that is unwavering in its determination to make this world a reality, even if the task may be longer than our own lifetimes. H-O for optimism. A positive attitude that savors all the good that is happening in the peace movement, is able to evaluate our efforts, celebrate our progress, and admit errors and difficulties without laying blame. We don't want to take any energy for that nonsense. H-O-P, patience. We must practice, just like a musician or an athlete practices her skill, his craft. We must practice patience in our discourse with others. We are committed, as author Robert McElroy states, to a true public argument that is civil, reasoned, critical, broadly penetrating of American society, and above all, moral in its nature and tone. We ought not to be afraid. We should educate ourselves and know the moral arguments against a war that we've been calling illegal, immoral, and unjust since 2002. H-O-P-E, efficacy. Efficacy is a little deeper than efficiency. I go back to my Catholic roots, and efficacy has a sense of power in it. We must spend the time to know and understand the audience whom we want to persuade. We must lay aside any kind of disdain and anger and approach in a spirit of friendship to launch our question, what will really achieve peace? What is the path to long-term security? And will you join me on that path? H-O-P-E-S, solidarity. We are many groups here, many traditions and gifts. Solidarity is not a buzzword and can never become so. Solidarity is the lived experience of our commitment to peace, that can overcome differences. Solidarity is the space we make in our hearts for all peacemakers all over the world. And solidarity is the conviction that all of us here, all throughout the country, can pull together again and become a great and peaceful nation once more. Hold on to our hopes. That is our duty. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Susan Blake from PeaceSmiths, one of our role models of peace activism here in America.
First of all, I want to thank Megan for inviting me. And quickly, if you don't know about PeaceSmiths, we're on the South Shore, and that's the southern border. We do a monthly music and poetry coffee house. We do a monthly community forum. We have a cable access TV show that's on at 1:30 in the morning on Channel 20 tonight. And we do a monthly leafleting at a military recruitment center in Committeperson. We do this in cooperation with the Suffolk Peace Network, which is covering in Patchogue and Huntington as well on other Saturdays. But there's a gap on the second Saturday of the month, and I think it would be great if the national groups would perhaps take the Hempstead recruiting station, because we in Freeport there's already a Keystone station going on, but we'll hear more about that later. Anyway, first of all, we should never make the mistake of supporting any congressional proposal that does anything other than cut off the funds. Look what we got. And these kinds of compromises are going to keep coming up, and we can't fall for them. And we can get a bigger vote no next time and maybe actually cut off the continuation. And even if we do succeed in cutting off the funds, what about the military bases that we want to leave there, and the privatization of oil, and the mercenary private forces that are there? We have to say all of this and use this opportunity when the theme of the meeting, we have a critical mass now of public opinion. Let's educate the public and bring them along for the stronger demands and the big picture. This is the time to tie together that we don't only want to end the war on Iraq. We don't want to bomb Iran. We don't want to continuously support the Israeli military and foment civil war in Lebanon and Palestine. We don't want to be dependent as a society, leading the world, dependent on oil. And this is a critical time now with the consciousness about climate change, where we can tie environmental issues to war issues. And let's not forget about nuclear power. The fuel cycle, this is the thing that's being used as the excuse to invade the next country. And that brings us back to our own issues of how the nuclear fuel cycle affects indigenous people here and around the world. What about torture? We're all so busy about trying to stop the war. I mean, they got us coming and going, but here we can talk about torture. Have we not done enough diligence on closing the SOA, H.R. 1707? The party has not signed on this year. We've been so busy, we let that go. It's time, with the public behind us, to repeal the Patriot Act. Those principles of diplomacy, strengthening the United Nations, self-determination, and non-interventionism. Remember, cut the military budget, fund community needs. This is our long-time message, and this is our time when we can involve the public. We stop in destabilizing other nations, maybe we can solve the immigration problem. So we're all exhausted, but we have to just keep doing, and don't vote for the one you think is going to win the primary. Vote for somebody who might actually articulate our concern about the war, although I know percentage last I knew was still pro-Afghanistan war, or vote third party. But, let's use this time to be uncompromising and let the politicians do the compromising.
peace. They're sharing their time, so they're really at the government.
Good evening, fellow conspirators. It's a radical idea that we can achieve peace in our lifetime. That's a very un-American idea. That's unfortunately our nation has evolved over the last 250 some odd years. Starting with the first incursions of Europeans to our shores, we began genocide, eradicating the Native American people. And we continued with the black-skinned people from Africa through slavery. And we continued all throughout our march to the California coast. And in 1961, the military-industrial congressional complex, that was in the original language of President Eisenhower's speech, and his advisors told him he could not accuse a fellow separate but equal branch of government of being part of that complex. So he scratched it out, but it's in the history books. That complex is as alive and sick today as it ever was. So that ending the war in Iraq is not enough. In the war of my generation in Vietnam, it took us 12 years, but the peace movement, very much at the end, with the help of the GI resistance, when the army would no longer fight the war that the generals and the politicians wanted, the war ended after 12 years. We're 5 years, and the casualties are mounting. And this time, we have to mobilize, start an insurgency if we have to, a new American revolution if we have to, take this country back from them and put it in the hands of the people. And some concrete things, I'm going to give you just two because I'm sure my 2 minutes gone. Check your stock portfolios, please, any of you that have stocks, to include your retirement benefits, and demand or sell off any stocks that you own or that your retirement funds own of the war industry. Let's call it, it's not a war industry. That's too nice a word. It's a genocide industry. And all is not humane. Second, the concrete thing I would suggest is that if any of you are veterans of conscience, not like most veterans unhappily in our country are, who because of their prowess often, if they were in combat, have to wrap themselves around the flag to justify the terror and the horror that they experienced in their war. But have it have some noble cause, meaning. If any of you are veterans, please join with Peter and myself and other Veterans for Peace. There's 24.5 million veterans in the United States. Maybe at the most 2,000 are members of Veterans for Peace, Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and the new cohort, the Iraq Veterans Against the War. That shows how strong our military culture is. And the last thing, I'm just going to end with a quote from Thomas Jefferson, the primary author of our Declaration of Independence from the tyranny of the British Crown. This quote is from 1785, when he spoke out against another evil in our society that we overcame, slavery. And this quote is especially apt in these times of xenophobia and Christian fascist genocidal crusade against the civilians in the Muslim world as well as anyone else that they deem not safe. Here's the quote. Indeed, I tremble when I reflect that God is just and good.
I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm just going to talk to you about some numbers. People think I'm in the race. These numbers that you see, on Monday, the number was 3422. And there were another 578. The 578 represented American military deaths in Afghanistan, and the 3422 represented the deaths in Iraq. And the total on Monday was 4,000. And that total has gone up. And one thing I would urge people to do, since according to Bill Moyer, when he wrote in Doing Democracy, keeping the problem out of people's consciousness is a way of preventing anything from happening to stop what's going on. I suggest that everybody start wearing these numbers. So when somebody comes up to you and says, what is that number for on your hat, you can say that it's an entry into talking about this immoral war. And the other thing I thought as I was preparing my 2 minutes was, in the Veterans for Peace chapter in New York City, we've had a particular problem since the Israeli attack on Lebanon in August. Our chapter's been pretty split about what to do about it. And we've been doing some work around the issue, and we feel that there's a need, and I think it applies very much to Queens and Long Island. There's a need to bring people back to the peace movement who were there in the 60s, who are not there now. And one of the ways of bringing them back is to begin the kind of dialogue where we talk about what's happening with the goal of coming up with a negotiated settlement that would allow Israel to live in peace and would end the terror that's being inflicted on the Palestinian community, so both sides can live in peace with a just settlement, where we, with the United States, and so an honest broker to help them come to terms, not as somebody who's sending cluster bombs over to kill the civilian population. So we felt in the chapter what we've been working on is to create the kind of space where we can have a discussion. We couldn't because the chapter voted not to discuss it anymore. They don't want to talk about it. But we pushed the issue, and we're meeting as a subcommittee and trying to create the same kind of space that already exists in Israel. In Israel, the Haaretz and the newspapers, people are discussing these things. We're not able to discuss it here. So my suggestion is that we try to keep all these issues that are supposedly dividing us in the public spotlight. Where talk about some of the issues that we're not supposed to talk about. And by opening up these issues, if people of good spirit, they can help bring about a solution. And the last thing I want to say is we participate in a number of street vigils. The biggest one probably is the Grandmothers Against the War at Rockefeller Center. On any given Wednesday, there are 65 or 70 of us standing on Fifth Avenue in front of the promenade at Rockefeller Center. But these vigils should be happening all over Long Island and all over Queens. If anybody's a little embarrassed by it, we have 2 in Queens. We have one in Forest Hills on Saturday from 11 to 12. There are about 10 veterans there. And the other one is in Flushing, in Casino, Maine, where there are a number of veterans and peak members of the Queens Network for Peace and Justice who vigil there. But we would help you start these things anywhere you like. But the more people see people on streets with signs protesting the war, it's a way of getting the public to try to turn against this awful war. Thanks very much.
Business in 54, the like-minded people, ALP for the young people, is the American Labor Party. When it went out of business in 54, 4 like-minded people wanted to stay together, and we're still at this time. We meet at the Unitarian Library. We have a speaker 10 months a year. We have a weekly vigil in front of the Freeport Post Office, Saturday, 11 to 12:30. And we have speakers, for instance, this month we had the first secretary of the Cuban delegation to the United Nations. Next month we have Raymond Govern, a former analyst for 27 years with the CIA, who has turned his back on the CIA, returned his medals given to him by Bush I, and considers the Iraqi war nothing but a contrived, perjured intelligence to falsely justify the Bush invasion. In any event, I want to address a couple of, I thought, more practical things. I would frankly de-emphasize the emphasis that we put on the press and the other media. We don't control them. We'll never control them. We distort ourselves and we misuse our time when we spend all that time thinking, how are we going to impress the media? What should we have in the sign? Can we control the sign? I would suggest to those in the peace movement not to literally forget the media, but demystify it. They're no different than any other aspect of our society. Murdoch, we're not going to convince. And Murdoch and other Murdochs represent the great majority of the media. Okay, I would emphasize that. And I would also emphasize that to show some courage. You never hear the word Afghanistan. There's no difference between Afghanistan and Iraq. There's no difference. There's no difference between Afghanistan and what they did to Jean-Bertrand Aristide in Haiti. There's no difference between that and what they did in Grenada. There's really no difference, except it was at different times between Iraq, Vietnam, and Korea. It's all the same problem. And one of the biggest problems of the peace movement is, of course, the issue at hand is the most important thing. But if we don't educate our constituency, we begin from the beginning every time there's a new issue. So when the Vietnam War ended, we lost a good part of our constituency. The Iraqi War begins. We had to begin, to a certain extent, all over, except for certain individual academics and others, but not the massive constituency that we have. I think we should be less careful. We're frightened to bring up certain issues. One of the issues, we don't know what to say about Afghanistan, so we just forget about it. It's okay for them to die, it's okay for them to bombard. And I think we should take particular note of last week's Nation magazine. It was entitled Hillary. And I remember I wanted to do some business at a party, and he said to me, Al, if you get together with that guy, you lay down with a dog, you get fleas. And I would suggest you lay down with Hillary, you get fleas. Put 6-7 years on the board of Walmart. She ain't us. 6-7 years. You know, the first job she had at a Yale Law School was with a left-wing law firm in the Bay Area of California. It had no influence on her. She is immune to that. She is a fully formed human being. If we could influence her, it would be a miracle, but we tried. And we should remember that there are other avenues of political approach than within the Democratic Party. In 1954, I was involved in a political activity on behalf of myself. One of the Democratic leaders whose support I wanted said to me, I'm going to support you. And it ended up, she delivered Port Washington for me, her, 1 vote, and 40 other votes for my opponent, which is fine, that's politics. Which reminds me of what Nancy Pelosi is doing today. She's against the vote. She says, I'm going to, the new proposal without any dates for withdrawals or beginning of withdrawals. She said, I'm going to vote against it. but she's made sure to deliver the Democratic Party for the Bush-type vote. That's what you can see for our individual part. I would just suggest that we try to educate our constituency, that we be a little braver than we are, and that we touch issues, whether it's Israel, Palestine, Afghanistan, etc. Remember, I'll just end with one word, one sentence. Don't forget, it was under Clinton that we bombed Iraq every damn day. He gave us the same baloney reason. Iraqi artillery radar flew out to an American plane, and we destroyed that piece of artillery. As if they were morons. They never successfully hit a plane. Who believed it?
Our next speaker is Dr. Hafiz Rahman, the president of Mahdi Darul Quran Mosque in South Africa.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure to be here. What a beautiful place. My first visit here. Ladies and gentlemen, remember the slogan, shock and awe, that we heard so much at the beginning of the war. It sure awed us all, the Americans, and it sure shocked the world in its inane cruelty. And remember the fascist phrase, if you're not with us, you're against us. Think what it does to you, sitting here. That left no choice to many thoughtful, decent people, but to be morally against us. Remember our allies, France and Germany? Remember how they were abused? Finally, one day the reality did hit, and 2 days after an unequivocal support for Rumsfeld, Bush dumped him. Ladies and gentlemen, the midterm congressional election gave a thrashing to the Republican Congress because it failed in its primary duty to oversight the executive branch of the government, which had gone amok. The electorate should have sent that message 2 years ago. Unfortunately, most Americans are against the Bush policy in Iraq, not because it is wrong, but because it is not succeeding. Unless we understand the invasion of Iraq was not only unwise, it was immoral, it was based on lies, we cannot formulate a welcome proposition. Brothers and sisters, in the throes of the midterm election, with his approvals down in the tank, Bush jumped another phrase, stay the course. What has the slogan, if you're not with us, you're against us, done to an ordinary Iraqi? It has made him an enemy of America. Remember the celebrated destruction of Fallujah and the many more smaller cities, while the world watched in horror, dropping of 1,000-pound bombs in densely populated areas, killing of more than 100,000 innocent civilians. Remember the horrible pictures of Abu Ghraib, which became the poster of the Bush doctrine torture. Most Iraqis were happy that the tyrant was thrown, but while their political liberties were not there during Saddam's time, at least the streets were safe. If they kept quiet, they could have a reasonably good livelihood. Now, the living is a nightmare, and Bush keeps trumpeting that we are fighting terrorists in Iraq so that all the killing is done here to keep us safe here. Iraqis are listening intensely. They now realize that Iraqi lives are expendable in the Bush doctrine. It's time to learn from recent history. Defeat of an immoral policy is better than following the corrupt policies to endless wars. Had we not been defeated in Vietnam, we would still be winning next week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. The same lies are being told to us today. Brothers and sisters, American prestige, the defeat in Vietnam liberated us and the Vietnamese too, and we found new way to grow, prosper, and even become friends. The failure is evident to all who can reason. As predicted, our bungling leader has not only landed the sole superpower in an unwinnable quagmire in Iraq, but now in Afghanistan we are also skidding and sliding towards chaos. Listen to another Bush slogan. Failure is not an option. That set needs to be sent to the junkyard also. It simply means victory at any cost and at any cost. This should be, in a moral democracy, unacceptable. We need to stand up for our morals and our values and say that hundreds of thousands of innocent lives lost through a policy that kills innocent civilians and creates more terrorists, it's too high a price to pay. No, we will not be a part of this immoral, mindless travesty. The obvious is very clear. This carnage cannot continue. We need to stabilize the surrounding governments there. Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia. They already have gotten together a few times. We have to back out, we have to remove our armies, and we have to tell them we will not interfere in their decision makings, and we will fund it. Now we are spending billions and having our soldiers killed. We should get our soldiers back, spend that money, let them decide what they need to do, and that will resolve our problem. Thank you very much.
We're working on right now is universal health care. We're starting a statewide national campaign around that. We're part of Citizen Action of Europe, which is a statewide organization. U.S. Action is the national organization. We're working on affordable housing, clean money from elections reform, education, and global warming. I'm worried about running out of time, so I'm going to talk a little fast. I want to get to my end. So I'm going to get to my end first, so I don't miss that part. So this coming next Thursday, there's flyers outside. We're going to be holding a press event outside of Congressman Peter King's office. Yes, we've done a lot of them. It's a great place to do a protest. And the concept of this is clergy and congregation members speaking out against the war. We are not doing this alone. There's organizations all around the country doing the same event. So because we're part of a national organization, we always try to do things around the same time of the week or within 1 or 2 weeks, and that's how we build power across the state. My time's up already? I didn't know that. So, the time is 11 a.m. 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 31st. My time is up already. Yeah, okay. So, we were asked, really, what is the strategy going forward? How are we going to change what's going on and build more power? And, all the polling says Americans are against the war, Americans are against the war. But as you see here, and everyone acknowledges, not enough Americans are doing anything about it. They might be sitting home and talking to their partner, the war is wrong, but they're not getting off their butts and doing any actions, and that's what this is about. We have to have action all across the country. So how are we going to do this? So Little Progressive Coalition, we have a recipe for success. Recently, we ran a statewide with our affiliate Citizen Action on Europe around education, public education. And we ended up changing the state aid formula to be based on needs, not a matter of who is your senator, which is how the money for education has been distributed. And how did we do that? What we do is we buy a voter list. We have a target, a political target. We have to first figure out who is the one who can give you what you want. We buy the voter list. And you can volunteer phone banks to call people and identify through a script. You know, hi, I'm calling from the Progressive Coalition. The war is going on for a long time now. Are you against the war? Then all of a sudden you have the name of someone in the district that you can start turning out for events. So you do enough of that, you have a huge list of people to turn out, and then you start doing phone banking. So you try to get them involved in calling other people. You also do door-to-door work, which is extremely effective. Friends and neighbors lists. Putting together a list of all the people you know, all your friends, all your neighbors, and then reaching out to them. So, there is a way to do this to really turn out more people. It might be considered smoke and mirrors to your elected officials, because all of a sudden you're getting thousands of phone calls and thousands of handwritten letters, which are really effective to those elected officials. But your one letter, handwritten letter, represents thousands of voters to that elected official. So the more of those outreaches that we can do, the more of those actions we can do, the better off we are. And one other question that we were asked is, how can we engage more people in this movement? And people don't want to go to meetings. We know that with our work as well. They don't want to go to a meeting and listen to something. They want to go out and do action. And a lot of people cannot make meetings. So you have to find other ways of doing it. Email is a great way to do it. People have email lists and distribution lists. It has to be targeted. It has to be a plan. They have to realize a lot of people are doing it. But we have to think about people who can't come to a meeting like this, but who still want to participate, because there's a lot of people out there. We got to get them involved. Thank you.
Next speaker is Drew Neal. He's with the Military Family Speak Out.
Hello, my name is Drew Neal. I would like to make honorable mention of the Gold Star families, the wounded, the maimed, and the Iraqi people devastated by this war. I am a member of Military Family Speak Out. We number 3,500 countrywide. We are one group of concerned family members with someone in the military. Our group at this time is participating in a coordinated grassroots campaign to educate the public about the issues of defunding the war. We hope with the help of others to press Congress to use their constitutional power of the purse to redirect the money being used to extend the war into money used for our troops' safe return home. We hope to accomplish this in two ways. The first we call direct, by writing of letters, postcards, and phone calls to the offices of the congressional persons. The other is indirect, grassroots rallies, vigils, marches, and letters to local newspapers. We also have a regularly teleconferencing training group to develop talking points on new and changing issues as new and changing issues arise. Our organization feels we can be most effective by putting a face on the pain, suffering, and impact on the soldiers and families. To aid in this, we use the tests and reports that truly reflect the wages being paid by all those affected by the hell of war. We say continue what is working, amplify what is working. Let us better coordinate our efforts by lending support and joining in similar issues to build our numbers at events. Let us look for similarities to further our cause instead of dissimilarities that separate our effort. Let us show we can bring our troops home by funding the soldier, not the war. Every day Congress fails to use their power to end the war, another 3 more families suffer the loss of a loved one. Countless Iraqis died. Congress has the ways and the means to end the war. Let us give them the reason.
Rosalie Young from Code Pink, Long Island.
I'm going to speak quickly too.
Move the mic down.
Better? Okay. Although the questions for discussion had been mulling around in my head for some time, when I finally sat down to put my thoughts to paper, it was Tuesday evening after news of the big sellout had reached my inbox. I think it's clear that whatever our strategies have been up until now, and however successful they may have been, we will have to do better and work harder, but never give up. We in Code Pink are optimistic that our unique brand of peacemaking will continue to reap benefits and that we will continue in large part with the strategies and tactics that have been our hallmark. First, a short introduction for those of you who may have missed the phenomenon that has been Code Pink over the last 4+ years. Code Pink is a women-initiated peace and social justice organization formed to end the war in Iraq, stop new wars, and redirect our resources into health, education, and other life-affirming nonviolent action, street theater, and other outrageous acts of rebellion. It was Code Pink who infiltrated the Republican convention with our anti-Bush slogans, prompts, and costumes, who appeared all over New York City with our pink split Bush regalia and literature, who dropped banners from Senate office building balconies, and who just a couple of weeks ago interrupted the Gonzales Senate hearings wearing orange prison jumpsuits and black hoods and holding signs that said, "I have nothing to hide except the truth," and resigned. An action that gained us national coverage, including a photo in the New York Times. And we have been effective both in D.C. and in the local districts, where our tactics gained us votes and allies like Representative Jane Harman, who in the short space of several months attributed her 180-degree change of heart and her vote for the McGovern Amendment to Code Pink activists in her district. On the agenda for the coming months, National Code Pink will be putting energy into organizing in the key primary states in order to favorably influence the presidential election. We will be focusing our lobbying efforts on newly elected Democrats who won on a peace platform who have not yet delivered, and working with Grassroots America and other peace groups to effect a successful swarm on Washington. This summer, we will hold trainings for women activists from all over and week-long camp programs at the D.C. Code Pink House, teaching them how to more effectively lobby, engage in media, etc. Here on Long Island, despite the visible focal points for our actions and events and the mostly non-presence of our national legislators, Code Pink has developed some strategies and tactics that have worked. Our very successful International Women's Day celebrations, co-sponsored by the Cinema Arts Center, where we have provided a forum for peace activists and filmmakers to provide education and consciousness raising for some 250 women and a few men through film and discussion and lively and irreverent entertainment. Okay, I'll finish up. What can we do better individually and collectively? For one thing, I think we all need to be more of a constant presence in congressional offices around Long Island. I think we need to turn up the heat with occupations and civil disobedience as other activists have done in D.C. and around the country. Our groups need to work even more closely with each other to create innovative actions that are so large they can't go unnoticed by the media. And we also need to create closer alliances with the press so they send reporters to our actions and not just photographers, and we get both newspaper and TV coverage. Last but not least, I think we should all plan to go down to D.C. in droves this summer to haunt our legislators until they hear us, and the majority of Americans. Code Pink will welcome you with open arms and some really neat costumes. Legislative Committee.
not one, I have a professor. One opportunity I have is I teach American foreign policy. And that I get to talk to non-peacenik kids every single day. That's what my job is, have those kinds of conversations. And so when I first had, I just want to relate the beginning of my introductory classes this past semester. So I started the classes the way I always do. How many of you have friends and relatives that are in Iraq or Afghanistan? And I would say right now we're talking about predominantly white, predominantly middle-income Long Island kids. I would say 80% of kids have their hands in the air. They have friends and relatives over there now. And then I say, okay, so, little exercise. A Martian has come, and the Martian wants you to tell them 5 facts about this Iraq war. Put it on paper. Panic in my class. Most people can't get to 3. Professor, I don't know about that stuff. I don't know what to say about that stuff. 3. So then I say, what about your cousins? What about your friends in Iraq? Are you folks, you all had your hands up. Do you not communicate with these people? Oh yes. I talk to them every day. Okay? But that's different. That's my cousin. You're talking about politics. I don't follow that. There would be, if I had $1 for every time I had that conversation, I would double my hostel salary. The second half, there's an underlying logic here. There with tolerate this. Okay. I have 4 points to make about Congress because I work with UFPJ on legislative work, and we've been working like crazy right now. 4 points. 1, Congress has to end the war. Bush won't. Not now, not ever. Maybe we'll have a better president in 2008, but that'll take us to 2009, and not any president, not a Democrat or a Republican, will act on end this war if Congress doesn't pave the way. Because this war is a hot potato. And the American defeat in Iraq, and we really need to take the measure of that, this defeat in Iraq, this disaster will be unprecedented in its gravity. And there is no one person in America who's going to take responsibility for ending it. We have to take responsibility. Congress has to take responsibility. Second point, Long Island is crucial. Why? Because we have 2 of the most influential senators in the country. Some of you have heard this. One of our senators is running for president. The other is setting strategy in the Senate. I would bet my shoes that Senator Schumer played a key role in the collapse of the Democratic leadership in Congress this week. Between them, Senator Schumer and Clinton are setting the tone for their party. And while we've had some success in making them accountable, we have a long road to travel. Also, the Long Island delegation. This is Russians, we're all talking like maniacs. But let's just take a moment for, and I don't want this on my time, to give a round of applause to ourselves for the first time ever, Israel Ackerman McCarthy voted against funding for the war. Totally shocked. Marty on the way in said, he was yelling at McCarthy's office up until 2 hours ago. The people hadn't decided this is all of our effort. But we know they didn't decide until a few hours ago. And up until a few hours ago, these Congress people have been a drag on the Democratic Party. They are holding the party back. They have prevented the party from mounting effective opposition to the war. We should absolutely thank them tomorrow morning. Finally, I haven't called to say thank you ever. Call them and say thank you, but we know this is the first time, and we really have a good job in solidifying that. Point 3. We can influence these people. We can influence Schumer and Clinton, and we can influence our Congress people. Schumer is a bulldog on Gonzalez. We need him to be a bulldog on this war. But for that to happen, we have to mobilize the thousands of Long Islanders who are not represented in this room. The folks like my students and their families, we have to get them into motion. These folks are not happy with the war. Across my semester, I hear students say the same sentences. My boyfriend is back from Iraq. He's different now. My friend is stuck there. My brother says they don't still needs to be done, but we have to mobilize that strength among ourselves. To my last point, if every speaker said the same thing, we have great speakers up here. We have to win. We have no choice. This crazy president has set the Middle East on fire. And responsible citizens across this country have to turn the direction of this country around. We need to do it for the sake of the Iraqis, for the Iranians, for the people who live in the Middle East, for our soldiers that are trapped over there, for the safety of our country, and for the well-being of future generations. We can't be so angry. We can't be so discouraged. We have to win. Thank you.
My next speaker is Reverend Mark Lucas from the Eastern Faith Alliance and the pastor at Bethany Congregational Church.
A pastor, a pulpit, a 4-minute time limit. That's God from here. I think we all agree that, except maybe for the White House, and I don't know, maybe Joe Lieberman, the one thing that just about everybody seems to agree on these days is that the war is a mistake. And I think Joe, when he comes out of his meditation, he's going to be good. But you know, and I know, that this war is more than simply a mistake. And it's more than just a boondoggle that was poorly conceived and incompetently carried out. It's more than a colossal waste of money, though its cost could have eradicated world hunger several times over. And it's more than a stain on our national honor or an excuse to erode our civil and religious liberties, even though it is all of those terrible, terrible things. Because more important and central, more important than any of those things, this war is, like all wars, above all else, an orgy of death. A bloodbath that every hour of every single day is taking the lives of real human beings. Real young men and real young women from our armed forces and those of our allies. Real Iraqi civilians, real women and real children, real people of the nation that we supposedly went in there to liberate. Fathers on their way to work, mothers trying to take care of their children, farmers and teachers and cab drivers and merchants and all kinds of real people simply trying to make a life in the cities and the villages of the war-torn lands of Iraq and Afghanistan. Every hour of every single day as the president yammers on about a victory that even he can't define or defend, as our so-called representatives go back and forth making courageous speeches one day and capitulating the next day, as generals come and generals go, and too damn many of us keep too damn quiet for fear that some misguided armchair patriot is going to accuse us of not supporting the troops. Another soldier dies. Another child weeps for her mother. Another family, some of them right here on Long Island, prepared to bury another idealistic young man or young woman whose life was cynically sacrificed in the name of patriotism or freedom or the war on terror or some other very convenient slogan that is supposed to justify that what we know simply cannot be justified. And so, what are we going to do? I believe we need to stand up, we need to screw our courage to the sticking point and do whatever is necessary by whatever means are available to stop this bloodshed, to end this atrocity, to bring the soldiers home. Not someday or soon or in 6 months, but right now before one more life is lost. We got to write, we got to donate, we got to march, we got to preach, we got to scream, we got to lay down in the streets if that's what we got to do. But we can never, ever, not for 1 minute, let our so-called leaders forget that this isn't about patriotism or national pride or even fighting terror. This is about the broken and decimated lives of real human beings. This is about our children, our parents, our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors. This is about the slaughter of the innocent, about the waste of the best and the brightest of our nation and of their nations. And that every hour, every single hour, my friends, of every single day is taken from the human community something that can never be restored. Lives that we will never, ever get back, and futures that will never be. What can we do? We can speak truth to power. We can remind the war makers and their sympathizers of the words of Abraham Lincoln, who looked out at his so-called victory and said, "There is no honorable way to kill. There is no gentle way to destroy, and there is nothing good in war except its ending." And we can assure those who are responsible that the blood on their head and yet on our hands will not be washed off by slogans or compromises that let the killing continue, but only by those with the courage to stop it. And finally, we can promise together. We can make a pledge to God, to our troops, and to one another that we will honor their sacrifice by learning from it, that we will not sanctify the slaughter with our silence, not now, not in our name, and by God, not ever. Thank you.
Before we move to that, remind you that in the package, there are letters, you don't have to look at them, there are letters to our senators, there's a letter to the representatives, there's a list with contact information so that everybody can follow the 5-minute rule every day or every week to call their senators or their representatives. And there's ideas for what you can do to end this war. And so we ask that you take a look at that before you leave. We said the audience would have a minute. We're going to try to be as brief as possible so that we have as many voices as possible.
Hi everybody. I have
I just want to no announcements, meetings, or things like that. The materials you can have it, people can hand them out. We really want people to speak to the question about how we're going to end
the strategy to end the Iraq war is to put pressure on to impeach George W. Bush and his change. To keep it alive, very briefly, in the rules of the House of Representatives, there is something, there is a means whereby any citizen, any single citizen, can file what's called a memorial petition. One person can call on Congress to impeach any federal official. It's in their own rules. And this can be done. I have 30 of these. I hope folks will come by and see me afterwards. It needs to be notarized. When it's notarized, every single person who signs this has, your signature is pretty much beyond question if it's notarized. We want to get a big stack of them. We want to take them down to Washington. I'm with the Green Party of the United States, the Green Party of New York City. So what you can do is, I urge you all to think about this. This is a really direct way to say to the Congress that we want this investigation to go forward. And again, it takes real responsibility on your own children. Every single person, you can't, when you do this, you're pretty adamant. And if there are a lot of people who do it, they'll take it seriously. And I hope you'll come to the end.
Yes, my name is Mara, and I represent here the Long Island School of American Watch. We had our group meeting last Tuesday to be prepared for today. I heard something that is very important that I want to say, solidarity. I think if we have to get all together, unify, and present only one front against this war, and work all these organizations together. We have the School of America, suppose everybody knows here what it is. It's a training military school located in Fort Benning, Georgia. Our group, that is a national group, has been fighting for many years to close this school, and today we have a bill 1707 that actually Ms. McCarthy has to sign to co-sponsor. I mean, this is the bill that is going to, for the closing of the School of America, for the investigation of what this school is doing, and we have to ask Caroline McCarthy to sign to co-sponsor this bill. So I think in my message to discuss solidarity, and I have something else to sign on to the impeachment movement and to keep marching.
Let's go back to the original sin. We've been given 2 hours and no one is talking about 9/11. I think we need to discuss what really happened on 9/11. I'll give you a few quick things. Happened on 9/11 was a crime of epic proportions. With every crime there was a motive. So who had the motive? 19 guys with box cutters who came to court for freedom or the Project for the New American Century, whose members include Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, Scooter Libby, and Jeb Bush. In September 2000, they published this document, Rebuilding America's Defenses. On page 51, they said they needed increased military spending, regime change correct, and in order to do that, they needed, quote, a catastrophic and catalyzing event, like the new Pearl Harbor. Page 51 of this document. That line, real quick. System Planning Corporation. They can fly planes by remote control. Here's the document. Please do the research and look it up.
I was thinking what's the difference between the peace movement now and the one that ended the war in Vietnam. One, there are 2 legs missing or a little bit short in the peace movement. One is the resistance of the soldiers, we cannot do anything for that. The other is the student movement, the campuses. It's evident here, look at the audience. We are missing the students. If we have to get to the professors that are progressive in order to mobilize the students, but we should do that because the government will be very afraid if the campuses start again. We don't need another Kent State, but we need the students.
I was briefed July 2001 by FEMA of this pending attack that was going to take place. We got together with 60,000 first responders at Ground Zero that are dying of the toxic dust. My father died, he lived in Rockville Center, from the toxic dust. We were on the phone that day with FEMA, the first responders, and they told us it would be 1,000 years. And for anybody for 200 years, in the 5th year are going to be dying. There's 60,000 now. If we all don't work together and stop nitpicking about what happened on a particular thing and get to the truth, we must work together. There's 60,000. In another 5 years, we're going to have over 100,000 deaths from 9/11 toxic dust. Has anybody also comes into reaching out to focus pressure on those in Congress who are the soft pressure points. In '06, some of us organized by Citizen Action of New York, I think that was under the Progressive Coalition. We went down to Pennsylvania, we campaigned against Congressman Gerlach. And this is Republican, very safe incumbent seat. And we didn't beat him, we got close, but he sneaked in. But not it was legit, but we almost beat him. But apparently we did throw a scare into him, because this is a guy who used to have a very safe incumbency. He was one of the 9 moderate Republicans who went to President Bush and pleaded with him to change course in order to save their seats. And also organizing that group was Congressman Charlie Day. He's in the congressional district right next door to Gerlach. And he had the same exact experience, a very safe incumbency, and suddenly he had the scare of his life also. So how would you pressure Congress people who are not, live in their district? Well, one thing, of course, was what we did. We went down there and go door to door and urge people to phone their congressperson. Another is, I give out lists of voters' names, which I think was referred to. Okay.
Everybody gets my competitive a recent graduate of University president.
What?
Sorry, I'm a little too tall. I'm a recent graduate of Washington University last week, and a student of Professor Eisenberg, fire speed, way to go. Like I was going to comment on what the gentleman said, but I guess I can just follow up and re-emphasize. It's really amazing to be a part of a group that are thinking and talking and contributing really fantastic ideas to ways to build peace and ways to promote change. But like you said, sir, the audience is not filled with enough young people as there are people of other generations. Oh, that's my idea. There are campuses, I can think of 20 college campuses with at least one progressive-minded student enough to affect change on that campus. Washington University just had its Day of Peace on May 9th, the last day of classes, where over 300 students came out and celebrated peace and just coexistence in general. We didn't call it end the war, it was more of a peace movement of coexistence. But what I want to tell you is, do you have children, do you have grandchildren, do you have neighbors, do you have cousins, do you have nieces and nephews? Bring them, talk to them, challenge them to think. Students like to think if you teach them how to question authority. They don't have any inspiration unless you give it to them. Please tell your children, grandchildren, neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you for your strong protest from the panel, and all of us are protesters. We spent years protesting. We have to think of something beyond protesting, such as a new social, economic, and political system, because the one in which we live now is evil and criminal and murderous and has no intention of changing. And how can we get them to do so? As an example, they have 1,400 military bases all over the world. And how are we going to stop that? They're still going to be in Iraq after we remove supposedly our troops, because there are another 130,000 mercenaries there. They're into the people in Washington, the military-industrial complex, as it's called, has an intention of imperialism that will control the world and control you and me, and they control the media. I'd like to know what protest, what can we do beyond protest, what can we do beyond protest to suggest and campaign for a new social, economic, and political system, because this one is absolutely criminal and evil.
I'm Mike Vincenzo, as someone who also teaches at Hofstra, I want to celebrate Michael Femina, who was also my student. I think someday all of you will have a chance to vote for him for Congress. And a lot of other good young people like that. I like what Herb says and Al says. I think there are a lot of deep structural problems that need to be addressed in our society. But I have two specific proposals. One of them is kind of simple, and I think the other is more complex. The reality is, some have spoken about building solidarity. There are a lot of Americans out there, as Rusty has mentioned, with students who care and are troubled. they aren't quite sure what to do, and partly because a lot of Americans who are otherwise good people suffer from ADD, attention data deficit disorder. And it's not easy to really keep up with all the complex things that are going on one hand, and also it's not easy for most normal people who lack the courage and commitment of a lot of people here to stand up against their elected officials. They've got to be given a reason, because the inclination is to say, well, gee, they're the representatives of our government, and it's hard to do that. So here are my proposals. First of all, to overcome cognitive dissonance, being out of touch with reality, we just need a list of the 10 worst things about this war. All of us can make such a list. It's got to appear on one side of the paper, so that paper can be circulated as widely as possible. It's the equivalent of political talking points. So it's reinforced, 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 and a mark gives us a good start. The second part of that page is the more complex one, but I think we can do that too. And when a lot of people say, well, yeah, it's awful, it's a problem, it's a horror, people are dying, it's a genocidal thing, then they respond when Bush and Republicans say, well, you're going to surrender. And what's the Democrats' plan? Well, the Democrats don't have a plan. We've got to give them a plan. And I think there are a lot of thoughtful people who can do that. Rusty does it every day. On the second side of this sheet should be 10 steps in the order in which they can be taken to get our troops out of Iraq and how we can address the complex issues in the Middle East. Then we can get to the structural changes once we get the ball rolling in those factors.
The last four of you to be, so that we get you to be very, very quick, because we're talking tape.
Like the rest of you, I've been frustrated over these past 4 or 5 years, and a little over 2.5 years ago, I bought 3 4x8 sheets of plywood, and on those 4x8 sheets of plywood, I put down the fact that I'm against the war, I want peace, how many lives were being lost, and I put them on my front lawn. I know it's not doing the business saying, because about 6 months ago, I had a visit from the town of North Hempstead, John Cagan and the attorney and 4 other inspectors who said I violated the town rules. So I waited 45 days and took down those 3 4x8 sheets of plywood, moved my signs back a foot, and put up 4 blue signs which say, impeach, bring boys home, and every one of you should do the same. Put signs up on your lawn, because you're not going to get the press, you're not going to get John Cagan, you're not going to get the rest of the people to support you. And furthermore, I say this, every village and every town meeting and every county meeting should have an organizing group of us to go there and say, we want our local officials to support the end of the war. We don't expect it from Washington. Let's get it from our villages and towns.
Up until the early 90s, Long Island was a very important strategic military place, and we had a lot of DoD contractors, Grumman, Sperry, this was a hotbed of that activity. In the 90s, it was decided to move all of that down to Texas and Florida, and we see what they're doing with it now. Now, there's a lot of patriotism in this area, and we have the air show and all that stuff, but long story short, DoD is really gone from this area. But with my background, I've noticed that there's something being left out here. This war is being fought about money. It's all about money. And we need to look at the way that we are spending our money, because we can sit there and scream and kick and yell, but if we don't back it up with
our wallets, and we don't hit them in their wallets, which is really the only language they understand, we're not going to have much of an effect. The politicians aren't listening to us. They're listening to IBM, Sun Microsystems, Halliburton, all the DoD contractors, all the big communications companies which are invading our privacy. We need to look at how we're investing our money. Pull our money out of those companies. Don't back them. Put your money into something
Greetings, everybody. My name is Ed Weinberg. I must tell you that I am 77 years of age, and I've been a liberal activist for 60 or 70 years. I've been involved in numerous liberal organizations. I noticed the letter that was prepared, the form letter that suggested that we send to our various subcommittees, all the congressmen and senators. An excellent idea, and I will do that also. I want to go one step further. I'm going to suggest that we make maybe 50 or 100 photocopies of this letter, distribute it to your friends and others, and see that they send it out to the various places.
My name is Kimberly Wilder, and I have quick things that are mostly compliments. I just want everyone to know that Tom Brinson is a poet, and poets are really good on the platform, and I'm so honored to be a poet. Susan and Leslie made me think about something so interesting about, we do have the means to end the war now, so let's show the lessons in the future of how to end wars and how you don't ever have any war, and I think that was just a very well-taken lesson. I wanted to say to the young man from Hofstra that I think that's a really neat thing when he said, it just percolated with me, question authority, that's what we have to teach our young people, and I wonder if there's anyone here that doesn't have their young person with them because their young person questions authority too much. So just a challenge to ourselves that we can take angry young people and questioning young people and not be shy of our own family problems. Thanks.
I want to thank you for knowing that you're going to send those letters out, that you're going to get 5 friends to send, that you're going to make a call, that you're going to look in the packet and see the Long Island clergy and religious call to end the war, you're going to wrap it, you're going to get your clergy person to sign on to that, and you're going to send it back to us as well. Like Martin Luther King, you have to be strong agents for peace and justice, and that's what we're here doing tonight, and that's what we're going to be doing in the days ahead. So I want to thank our panel, and I want to thank Leslie Cagan our panel because they represent the diversity of the community here that we live in and the company that we keep together tonight and in the days